Alright, so this episode was an absolute banger, I have to say. By the way, guys, welcome to this new video. Before everything, I have to say I enjoyed this episode the most so far out of this season. And there are pretty good reasons towards that, so stick with me. I'm gonna break down this episode and I'm gonna review it. So let's just start. So we are beginning with the one and only Angstrom Levy. And we can see that he got his head mushed to the oblivion. I actually don't know. I know, but it's kind of shame that they didn't show the damage in the season 2, but there was probably not a budget for that. But anyways, I was kind of worried that animators wouldn't be able to display the goriness of his face, much like a tomato, because, in the comics it was like super damage and so on. And my worries were there because I thought we could already saw Angstrom Levy repaired in the previous episode where they were cliffhangering us towards another episode, and his face didn't look damaged at all, so I'm actually kind of glad that they could show that goreness. Anyways, his face is getting repaired by those surgeons. The design looks really cool, but the most important thing is that we actually can't see how he gathered those invincibles from another realities. I would actually, I would like to see at least a 1-minute sequence of him luring and talking to those other variant marks that he wants to work with them, but we actually skipped right towards him releasing all those invincibles into the prime reality. And the cool part about this is that everything happens in 3 days, so we got very good sense of time and what is happening. So day 1, by the way, I like how we hop onto the action instantly. Like, we get some, rambling with Mark and Eve, but that's like a minute, and then every comfort crumbles and we go just right into the episode. The first Viltrumite, which we actually encounter, besides all those cameos and Tech Jacket. Tech Jacket was really cool, but for the people who do not read the comics, they could have actually been really, confused, but he's probably gonna show up later. But the officially first Mark which we see is that Mark with Mohawk. So yeah, first things first, our Mark doesn't know what's happening at all. They actually then start fighting, which, we can actually see that infamous ear punch with both hands. I feel like he actually killed him with that strike in the comics. I'm not really sure. I'm gonna put it onto your screen. But anyways, we can also see Powerplex in the prison, and that makes him hate Mark even more, which is, come on. Our Mark didn't do anything wrong, come on. Oliver actually decides to join the opposition and goes out there to find Mark. What was quite intriguing is that we can see in the Pentagon that they were actually able to kill one of the variants of Invincible with only the sound system and reanimate. It was told that Invincible was much weaker than the ours, but I was still actually kind of surprised because after all, he is a Viltrumite, so yeah. Just like in the comics, we can actually see the Donald damaged and being robotic, which is absolutely cool design, I have to say. So alright, so that was basically the day 1. By the way, I forgot to mention that Mark and Eve went out there to help everyone and fight Invincibles, but other than that, there was nothing that intriguing about that. So when it comes to day 2, all heroes join together. I actually have kind of problem with that because I feel like every single of that hero could be defeated by only one Mark variant. So, but yeah, we need to do everything in order to protect the Earth. So yeah, that is cool, buddy. But from the power scaling standpoint of the show, like they have no chance. But yeah, what they're gonna do? Actually, one Invincible with the costume that doesn't show his hair finds Oliver, and they actually start to fight. And I was actually kind of worried for Oliver because, even though he's quite reckless with his powers and ruthless, I kind of expected Oliver struggling way more than that. He was actually keeping his ground, which is cool, but they probably have to nerf some Invincibles because otherwise they would be able to destroy the overall world in one day. It's cool to see those sequences where other heroes fight Invincible, but the count which actually does something to them is 0. So then we actually see the Omni-Man Invincible joining up with the Cloth Invincible. He's got a mask as a cloth, so I'm gonna call him like that. They actually fight Mark and Eve in honest 2v2. And there we can actually see how much of a glass cannon is Eve, because I've seen forums on Reddit that Eve is one of the strongest characters in the Invincible world. And I have to say, yeah, she's pretty strong. She's got really OP powers. But once you realize that any damage is really crucial to her, it's like, Mark was able to broke her leg with one twist of his wrist. And if he actually tried more, I feel like he would be able to kill her. So I gotta say, Eve is probably not the most strongest one because overall Viltrumites are, because they're both strong and resilient, but Eve is only strong. So the Eve gets hurt and then Cecil sends some reanimate there and he basically saves Mark and Eve, and then Eve gets some care from Pentagon. Actually, we can see the fight between the Guardians of the Globe, the actual Guardians of the Globe, the remaining ones, and one of the variants of Invincible. I have to say, there we can see how incompetent and funny are the Guardians of the Globe, because one variant of Invincible was able to take on them like nothing. We can actually see that ankle grab, which he does to Darkwing as well, which is, kind of funny. But I feel like the funniest thing here in this fight is beheading Immortal and using his head as a projectile to kill Eve. Like, that was just, I read somewhere that Immortal has seasonal executions, but in this season he got himself killed like 2 times, which is more than once. But Darkwing sacrifices himself and pushes him and other Invincible into the dark dimension. He saved the remaining lives of the Guardians of the Globe, and I actually thought Shapesmith was killed because he got that white eyes, and I thought he was, Mark was able to find that red spot, which Omni-Man actually did find, and he, killed him. That was kind of scary, but Shapesmith as the most annoying character survived. He's not the most annoying, that would be probably Rex. Then we shift our attention to Team, and first things first, I want to point out that how come doesn't Robot have something like a contingency plan for the Invincible? Like, he's one of the smartest, maybe the smartest guy on the planet Earth, and he didn't do anything. I thought he would be able to replicate the frequency because he was once able to block that frequency, so I thought he would be able to engineer it some way. But no, he would have gotten himself killed if it wasn't for Rex, which, shifting to Rex, I have to say his death was really rushed, I would say. It was not emotional at all. I feel like there was like 0 people who thought that death was pretty cool. And in the comics, it looked like a nuclear fusion, but here in the show, it actually looked like a bigger explosion, which wouldn't be able to even harm a Viltrumite. So, now I'm ranting about the visuals of the show because they showed the explosion like it shouldn't hurt the Viltrumite, because Viltrumites survived much more than that. So I feel like they should have actually animated it like more of a bigger explosion or something like that, because that was kind of lame. But Rex took the sacrifice and he saved the remaining teams of Team. I don't know if I should call it Team now, but yeah, let's proceed. So we then got a kind of a interesting conversation between Cecil and Invincible. First things first, you can think that Mark is really irresponsible to guard Eve and not go out there and save other people's lives. But I actually think the scene wasn't made towards us thinking he shouldn't be doing that, but I feel like that makes this character even better because, he's like only human. I know human is a bad word for him, but he sometimes puts emotions and his loved ones above the logic and what would be the best thing to do. And I feel like that's essentially what makes Mark, and that's why we love him so much. So I can't blame him for it, but it was kind of cool that Cecil was actually helping him and Mark was finally able to make a conversation with him, because in another video I was talking about that I'm more on a Cecil side. So yeah, he's just trying to protect the Earth. There's that's it. So we finally got ourselves on the day 3, and by the day 3, Invincibles were able to destroy the entirety of the world. 3 days. I feel like that's 2 more days than it should probably take them. But they were screwing around a lot. And as we can later find out, most of them are actually that bad. And they were actually obeying Angstrom's, orders. And it wasn't their motivation. But I feel like if they were actually locked in and they actually wanted to do those things, they would be actually able to do this in like 1 day. And I stand by my opinion. But unfortunately, talking about Invincibles, they are actually banished from this reality by Angstrom because they grouped up towards him because he basically broke his promises. He didn't do anything to them and he used them to do all of his dirty work. So after he banishes them to other reality, something happens which should have happened a long time ago. Mark actually charges him and he's not holding his punches back. Let's put it this way. So they actually start to fight. I have to say, like, from this point forward, this episode gets kind of boring. I'm not gonna say it was boring, but you know, the pacing of the previous 3 days was actually much better, I would say. And the fight between Angstrom and Invincible was basically, you know, Angstrom was controlling those cameras or those drones or something like that, and that was basically it. Like the fight from the Big Hero 6, it was like cool, but there was nothing which would be fight man versus man, really content fights and so on. It was like, I mean, I thought, why wouldn't he try to explode those drones as well? Because we could have seen that Mark was able to catch one in the previous episodes and then he actually blew up, and I thought he would be using it more. And I mean, Angstrom would be able to use it in a fight because Invincible was actually destroying them either way, so yeah. But I actually don't know, what are those drones made of? They shouldn't do any challenge to Weltromite, especially Weltromite like Mark. And you know, he had to lock in after all these fights to actually, you know, overpower those drones and catch the Angstrom by his neck. And then he actually wanted to kill him after Oliver persuaded him or gave him a speech, but he hesitated, and that way he wasn't able to kill Angstrom. But luckily he was able to rip his arm off, which meant that those surgeons weren't satisfied, and from this point on they are in charge of Angstrom. And I actually kind of look forward, what are they gonna do with him and what orders are they gonna give him. But that was actually it from the episode standpoint, and then we can see all the damages which were caused, and we can see that they all try to repair things, like Cecil tells Mark that New York needs help and so on. And then we can see all the heroes trying to help and do their best. They were trying to do that subplot that, you know, Powerplex started attacking Invincible. As I already said, like Mark can literally take all of his blasts and that doesn't do anything towards him besides causing him pain. So I have no idea what Powerplex thinks when he's actually attacking Invincible. You actually can't kill him, Powerplex. Please, get yourself educated, please. You know, we can actually see Eve's dad and mom talking to Mark. And you know, I for some reason thought they knew Mark was invincible, but it would be kind of nonsense for them to know it. So I have actually no idea why I thought they knew, but yeah, there is that. But you know, if you read the comics, they're gonna know in the future, but that's beyond season 3, so yeah. Then we can actually see that Immortal and Kate, they decide to give up on heroism and everything. And I have to say, like, finally, those two characters were probably the most hated characters so far. And I have to say that, like, they were the most boring. I didn't care about you, Kate. I didn't care about you, Immortal, at all. So I'm actually kind of glad that you're not gonna be fillering this show from this point on. So yeah, thank you for that. Cecil actually offers Mark to lead the new Guardians of the Globe, but he refuses because even though Mark doesn't want to kill Cecil, he still holds big grudges towards him. So if Mark's help will be necessary in order to, you know, do things, he would be cool if Cecil calls him, but not for sake of helping Cecil, but for sake of helping people. So the relationship are still not the greatest between them. I mean, I can't blame Mark. He was put an earpiece in his brain, so that's not cool. And last but not least, the one and only Conquest comes. I have to say, I love his voice. I love his design. He's got a pretty big aura. And if he thought this episode was really off the limits, another one, the last one, would be the greatest one you have ever seen. So, prepare for everything. We are gonna break that down in a week. So up until that, have a nice rest of the day and bye bye.